Hey, Reddit. I need to vent into the void of the internet because if I show this to any of my real friends, they'll either call the cops or start with the, "I told you so," again. And I don't want either. I just want someone to say, yeah, that's fucked up. And I'll change the names because he still follows my socials for some reason. My name is Sarah. His name is Kyle. We met when we were 23, in one of those hipster bars with board games and expensive craft beer in Portland. I was a shy graduate student in library science, buried in the world of cataloging and archival research. He was a charismatic, creative entrepreneur, who had just quit his job at a design firm to create without constraints. At first glance, he reminded me of a young, less battered James Dean, a mop of dark curls, perpetual 3-day stubble, piercing blue eyes that seemed to see the world in different shades. He talked about color palettes, fonts, and vibes as if they were a world religion. For me, whose idea of a perfect evening was a Victorian-era book and a cup of lavender tea, he was like a human energy drink, sweet, fizzy, and heart-racing. Our first date lasted 14 hours. We started with coffee, then went to a bookstore, where he horrified examined my choices, a treatise on 18th-century parchment archival methods. "Sarah, are you trying to put me to sleep on a second date?" And in return forced an underground graphic novel about a post-apocalyptic skateboarder on me. Then came dinner at a Vietnamese place where he made the waiter explain every ingredient in the sauce, followed by a long walk through the night city where he recited passages from Ginsberg's Howl from memory. I was smitten. My world was orderly, quiet, and dusty. His world was loud, chaotic, and dazzlingly bright. He made me feel like I'd lived my previous 23 years in semi-darkness, and he'd come and thrown open all the curtains. The first 2 years were intense. Not in terms of fights, but in terms of emotional roller coasters. He could wake me at 2 a.m. because a genius logo idea struck him, and I had to sit in the kitchen in my pajamas, drink lukewarm tea, and listen admiringly to a half-hour rant about Gestalt psychology and design. He orchestrated grand, meticulously planned surprises, not always the ones I wanted. For example, one Friday evening when I had a dissertation chapter deadline, he burst into my tiny apartment with 2 plane tickets to Las Vegas for a flight in 3 hours. "We're tired of this grayness, sunshine. We need lights, gambling, madness." I cried from exhaustion and stress, but he convinced me this was life, spontaneous, unpredictable. I finished writing my dissertation in the hotel room while he lost our money at a blackjack table, later justifying it as seeking inspiration in risk. He hated my friends. My best friend, Emily, a quiet, smart girl who worked as a museum restorer, was a walking zombie from the art history graveyard to him. My childhood friend Mark, an engineer, was dubbed a soulless walking calculator. My attempts to organize joint meetups ended in failure. Kyle either monopolized the conversation talking about things no one understood, or withdrew into sullen, contemptuous silence, making everyone uncomfortable. Gradually, I started turning down invitations. First, "I'm tired," then, "Kyle and I are busy," and then friends stopped calling altogether. My fault, I know. Back then, I thought it was the necessary price for love, for this dazzling union of opposites. He called us yin and yang, and I was flattered to be the quiet, stable yin to his turbulent, creative yang. We got married in our 4th year together. The proposal was as theatrical as everything he did. He drew a whole comic about our relationship and handed me the bound copy on an observation deck. The last page had the question. I cried and said, yes. The wedding was his show from start to finish. He designed everything himself. From the Art Deco save the dates to the dinner menu styled like a Pantone palette. My timid suggestions for something classic, elegant, a simple veil, white peonies, a string quartet, were mocked as banal and devoid of personality. We're not a faceless mass, Sarah. We are a work of art. In the end, we had a ceremony in an industrial loft. Guests were greeted by a DJ playing ambient music, and I walked down the aisle to some experimental track Kyle called the sonic embodiment of love's evolution. My hairstyle was done by his stylist friend, resulting in something with geometric partings and live orchids woven in so tightly my whole scalp itched. In the photos, I looked striking, surrealistically beautiful, but like a stranger. Like a doll dressed up for an installation titled, Kyle's Wedding. My mother cried that day, and I was sure they were tears of joy. Only years later did she admit they were tears of despair because she saw her daughter dissolving in this man's shadow. The marriage began to crack almost immediately after returning from our honeymoon in Iceland, where he, of course, wanted to go because their minimalism resonates with my inner aesthetic. His grand plan to open Kaleidoscope Designs remained just a plan. He rented a small space, bought expensive equipment on credit, which I later had to pay off, and waited. Waited for the right clients who would appreciate his vision. Freelance gigs that occasionally came his way were mostly abandoned halfway. The reasons were always lofty. The client is a cretin with the taste of a cockroach. The brief stifles my creative freedom. This project exudes an energy of poverty, and I can't create in that atmosphere. Money, my money, vanished into the black hole of his self-actualization. Besides tech, there were endless courses on digital sculpture, art therapy, mindful creativity, with some guru from California. He joined the most expensive gym in town because the body is the creator's temple, and it must be in perfect shape to receive ideas. But the root of the problem wasn't financial irresponsibility. The root was his narcissism, which had morphed from charming self-confidence into a monster devouring our space. Kyle wasn't just the center of his own universe. He sincerely believed my universe should revolve solely around him. His mood was the barometer for the entire household climate. If he was in a creative crisis, which happened increasingly often, the whole house was plunged into darkness. Curtains drawn, TV volume on minimum, speaking in whispers. I had to listen to hours-long monologues about the meaninglessness of existence, how society crushes geniuses, his profound disappointment. He could lie on the couch for days, staring at the ceiling, while I, after 10 hours in a stuffy archive, had to cook, clean, and still find the resources to comfort him. If a rare wave of inspiration struck, I was obligated to immediately share his euphoria. Drop everything. Dance with him in the living room. Listen to him plan to conquer the world of design. My own successes, defending my dissertation, a promotion to senior archivist, were acknowledged sparingly, as something taken for granted. Well done, sunshine. I always knew you could do it. By the way, look at this icon I drew today. It's genius, right? His own minor achievements, like finally finishing a logo for a local bakery, were celebrated as historic events. I had to organize a celebratory dinner, invite his 2 or 3 equally creative friends, write glowing posts on his social media. He always checked if I praised him enough. Sex transformed from an act of love into a tool of manipulation and affirmation of his power. If I refused because I was drained after a long day, it was instantly interpreted as a personal insult. What, you don't find me attractive anymore? You're killing my masculinity, Sarah. You're always so cold, like an iceberg. I need warmth, passion. This could be followed by a week of icy silence or, conversely, aggressive, almost violent attempts to ignite passion in me. Rough, unpleasant, leaving me feeling used and dirty. The isolation became almost total. He masterfully vilified everyone dear to me. My mom, who in our first year of marriage gently hinted that I looked tired, was declared a toxic manipulator who wants to get you back under her control. After several scenes he made following her visits, I reduced contact to short, cautious phone calls. I practically stopped communicating with friends, citing endless busyness. My world became him, my sun, moon, and stars, which either blinded me or gave no light at all. The boiling point, the moment when the water in the kettle of my patience didn't just hiss but blew the lid off and flooded the entire stove, was our 8th anniversary dinner. By that point, I was sleepwalking. I functioned on autopilot, work, home, servicing his needs. My own desires seemed to have vanished. I even stopped buying books because he grumbled that paper media is an atavism and collects dust. Foolishly, nostalgically, I hoped that on this day we could briefly return to our origins. I booked a table at that same little Italian restaurant where we'd had one of our first normal dates, before all the Vegas flights and Icelandic minimalism. I wore a simple black dress he always called boring, but in which I felt like myself. He arrived 40 minutes late, gloomy as a thundercloud. No apology. Sat down silently, leaned back in his chair, and immediately caught the waiter's eye. Wine. What's your most expensive? Doesn't matter, red or white. Just the most expensive. My insides went cold. We couldn't afford it. My salary barely covered the mortgage on his loft studio, which he never used as intended, turning it into a crash pad for friends after night outs, and our basic expenses. "Kyle, maybe we could get that Prosecco we like?" I suggested timidly. He looked at me as if I'd suggested pissing in his glass. "Today is a special day, Sarah. Or is it not? You want to celebrate our love with some cheap mass-produced swill?" I fell silent. The wine arrived. He poured himself a glass, took a sip, grimaced as if it were vinegar, but kept drinking. I tried to create the semblance of conversation, talking about work, about how we'd found a box with letters from some early 19th century pioneer in a remote corner of the archive, a minor sensation in our small circle. I got carried away, gesturing, momentarily forgetting where I was and with whom. And at the most interesting part, as I described unfolding the fragile sheets, he interrupted me. Not just interrupted, he set his glass down with such a loud clink that the couple at the next table turned around. "You know what I've realized over these 8 years?" He began slowly, with a theatrical pause, looking not at me but somewhere over my shoulder, as if addressing an invisible audience. "You are my anchor. In a good way, of course. You keep me grounded, keep me from flying into the stratosphere. You are my navigation system. Without you, I'd probably crash on the rocks of my own genius." There was no tenderness in his voice. It was a cold, analytical tone, as if he were presenting a project. I felt the blood drain from my face. "An anchor?" I whispered. My voice sounded foreign. He finally looked at me and sighed irritably, like an adult tired of explaining to a child why the sky is blue. "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. Don't take words out of context. I'm saying I need more space. For creative flight. For growth. You're too down to earth. Practical. You live in a world of catalogs, archive boxes, and dusty facts. My world is infinity, emotions, ideas floating in a vacuum. And sometimes I feel like you won't let me soar into it. You hold me by the hem so I won't fall, but I can't take off either." In that moment, I saw our life with terrifying clarity, and my breath caught. I wasn't his wife, partner, beloved. I was a function. The grounding function. The navigation system function. A human anchor. I was valued not for who I was, but for the service I provided to his great I. I was the crying towel, the wallet to be emptied, and the scapegoat for all failures. I didn't say another word. Finished my pasta, though it tasted like cardboard. Paid the bill with my card. He, of course, had forgotten his wallet. We drove home in silence. He immediately sat down at the computer, immersed in some new idea, evidently satisfied with having spoken his mind. And I went to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the floor, hugged my knees, and just sat there. Didn't cry, just sat and stared at the tile. Then I got up, washed my face with cold water, looked at my reflection. My eyes were huge, with dark circles, my face pale. I looked like a ghost. And that evening, lying next to him in bed, listening to his steady, self-satisfied snoring, I stared at the ceiling and understood a simple, undeniable truth. I couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't that I'd fallen out of love. Love is a feeling, and I seemed to have forgotten how to feel anything except a heavy, leaden fatigue. I had stopped loving myself. I had stopped recognizing myself. I had vanished. I'd become an appendage to his drama, a silent extra in his play, set dressing in his art installation titled, Life of a Genius. The next morning, while he slept, I drank coffee, got dressed, and drove to the office of the best, and essentially only, family lawyer in town. A recommendation Emily had secretly sent me months ago. Her name was Gwen. She was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and a gaze that seemed to see through all the world's lies and manipulations. I sat in her office for 3 hours, telling her everything. Not with sobs, but with icy, methodical precision, as if I were cataloging an archive. Gwen listened, nodded, took notes. When I finished, she set down her pen and said, "Sarah, what you're describing is classic emotional and financial abuse rooted in narcissistic personality disorder. He won't change. Your task now is not to try to change him or get through to him. Your task is to get out. Quietly, quickly, and with minimal loss to yourself. Are you ready?" I nodded. For the first time in many years, I felt not fear, but a strange, fragile sense of purpose. The divorce wasn't a battle. It was a guerrilla war, where my weapons were silence, documents, and unwavering resolve. When I told Kyle my decision, he didn't believe it. He thought it was another one of his manipulations working, and now I was punishing him to get more attention. First came the stage of the Grand Reconciliation show. He bombarded me with his own poems, drew my portraits, distorted, sad, as if I were a muse of sorrow, staged spontaneous romantic gestures, sent huge bouquets to my office. I gave them to the cleaners, tried to arrange a trip to Hot Springs. When that didn't work, came the anger. Real, furious, uncontrolled anger. He screamed that I was a traitor, that I'd never have achieved anything without his support and inspiration, that he turned a gray mouse into an interesting woman. He threw things, luckily, not at me, smashed his favorite ceramic mug I'd given him. He wrote long, venomous messages accusing me of killing our fairy tale, that I was as limited and boring as your mother and all your loser friends. Then came the suicide threat manipulations. Without you, my life has no meaning. Do you want to find my body? You'll be to blame. The first time scared me, and I called his brother. It turned out Kyle had used this tactic since his teens when his parents refused to buy him the latest gadget. After that, his threats lost their power. Through Gwen, I filed for divorce. We lived in a state requiring a separation period. I moved out immediately, the same day I told him, into a rental studio Emily helped me find in a day. I took only my books, clothes, laptop, and our cat, Maisie. Everything else, furniture, appliances, his endless creative projects, I left to him. This was a strategic move Gwen insisted on. The less you fight over property, the faster he'll agree to financially adequate terms. His ego will be satisfied with winning the stuff. He hired a macho lawyer who tried to pressure me, demanding spousal support for Kyle, claiming he had sacrificed his career to support the home. We had no children. Kyle had no income. The judge, a woman in her 60s, after hearing these claims and reviewing my bank statements clearly showing who supported whom, dismissed them in 15 minutes. The process was humiliating and exhausting, but Gwen was my shield and sword. Kyle tried to drag it out, reschedule hearings, demand more and more documents, hoping I'd break. But I was no longer the Sarah who could be broken by silence or screaming. I became a robot following instructions. Gather a document, sign a paper, appear in court. No emotions, no personal meetings, only through lawyers. The hardest part was dividing his art for debt's sake. Loans for equipment, overdue studio bills, credit card debts for courses and memberships. Gwen insisted on an independent appraisal of all his creative property. The appraiser, an older man with an ironic squint, examined his graphic tablets, computers, collection of designer chairs, and delivered a verdict. The market value of all this junk was 3 times less than the debt. The court ordered the property sold to cover part of the debt, and the remainder Kyle had to pay himself. I left the marriage with my student loans, which I diligently paid all those years, and nothing else. That was my victory. The final hearing was brief. The judge banged the gavel. Marriage dissolved. I walked out of the courthouse into a cold, sunny day. Kyle followed, his lawyer talking to him, but he was looking at me. His expression wasn't hatred, but pure, genuine bewilderment, as if observing a natural disaster that refused to follow his script. He couldn't comprehend how this quiet, obedient Sarah had managed to break out of the narrative he'd written for her. I got into my old Honda, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. For the first time in 8 years, I felt something in my chest unclench. It wasn't happiness. It was silence. Deafening, beautiful silence, devoid of his voice. The first month in my new place was strange. The silence in my little studio was frightening at first. I caught myself listening for footsteps in the hall, the sound of the door opening, his voice. But there was none, only the ticking of the wall clock, Maisie's purring, and city noise outside. I slept 12 hours a day, as if catching up on years of sleep deprivation. Then came routine. Work, store, home. I bought myself the softest, fluffiest blanket we'd never had because Kyle deemed them tacky. I ate what I wanted for dinner, simple pastas, soups, sometimes just avocado toast. No one criticized my choices. No one demanded culinary masterpieces. I reconnected with my mom. The first call was hard. We both cried, talked for 3 hours. She didn't say, "I told you so." She said, "I'm so glad you're back, my girl." Then I called Emily. We met for a glass of wine, and it was so easy, as if those silent years hadn't happened. I started therapy. My therapist, a kind woman named Linda, helped me sort through the junk in my head, the gaslighting, the guilt, the lost identity. She named things. That was abuse. Emotional. You have a right to be angry. You have a right to be yourself. I even started an Instagram. Not to showcase my life, but as a sort of diary. I posted photos of old, worn book bindings, bookmarks left in used books, beautiful library cards, intricate seals on archival documents. I named the account Archival Dust. I got 300 followers, other quiet, strange people, lovers of antiquity and silence. I liked it. It was mine. I heard snippets about Kyle through mutual acquaintances, the few I'd reconnected with. He'd left Portland, they said. Moved to Los Angeles to some new muse, a performance artist who understood his soul. I hardly thought of him. He became a distant, unpleasant memory, like an illness you'd rather forget. I even changed my phone number, but kept the old one on a separate SIM, just in case, for services I was too lazy to update. That SIM lay in a drawer, silent. And then this morning, an ordinary Saturday as I drank coffee and planned a trip to a library free market, that SIM card in my old phone, which I used as an alarm clock, vibrated. One short, electric shock-like message. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I saw it was an MMS. From an unknown number with a California area code. No text, just a photo. I opened it, and the world narrowed to the bright screen. The quality was professional, studio-like. High key, sharp contrast. The photo showed his back, part of a bare shoulder, and a fresh tattoo covering the entire shoulder blade. The style was hyper-realism, black and gray, with the only splashes of color, drops of scarlet, almost glowing blood on the blade of a sword and on the severed neck. He was depicted in stylized, fantasy armor reminiscent of a samurai fantasy mix. He stood in a proud, victorious pose, chin raised, expression calm, even solemn. And in his hand, held high, fingers clenched in a fistful of hair, was a severed woman's head. The head was beautiful. Eyes closed, long lashes, shadow on the cheekbones. The expression wasn't distorted by pain or fear. It was calm, submissive, almost peaceful, like a sleeping princess or a martyr from an ancient fresco. Hair, chestnut, thick, wavy, falling in heavy locks. The shape of thin, elegantly arched eyebrows. The contour of the lips, not full like a doll's, but narrow, with a barely noticeable dimple above the upper lip. And a small, barely visible mole above the left eyebrow, closer to the bridge of the nose. My mole, my hair, my eye shape, my mouth. It was me, not an exact photographic copy, but an unmistakably recognizable stylization. Symbolically beheaded and displayed as a trophy on his skin. A trophy he would now carry with him forever. My first reaction was physical nausea. A bitter taste rose in my throat. I barely made it to the sink. Then came the trembling. Not fear, that came later, a short, icy wave. First, it was pure, undiluted rage. Burning like acid. It tightened my throat and made my heart pound in my temples. I looked at the photo again. Zoomed in. Examined every detail. Every contour. Every shading mimicking skin. This was a complex, expensive, multi-session piece. How many hours had he spent under the needle, nurturing this image? Lying on his stomach, listening to the buzz of the machine, thinking of me. Channeling all his hatred, resentment, narcissistic rage into this one outlet. The vilest thought that crossed my mind. Did he discuss the details with the tattoo artist? Did he show him my photos? Here, see, hair like this. And this mole, don't forget. Lips like this, not fuller. Did his new muse see this head, approve of it? Maybe they chose the sketch together, laughed, drank wine, celebrating this act of liberation. I didn't reply. I didn't write a word. My fingers shook, but I took a screenshot of the message with the number, saved the photo, hate myself for it, but it's evidence, and then blocked the number. I removed the SIM card from the phone, almost breaking a nail, and shoved it into the farthest corner of the desk drawer. Then I sat on the floor in the living room, hugged Maisie who was purring anxiously, and just stared at the wall. My breathing evened out. The rage slowly settled, leaving behind a strange, empty coldness. And you know what, Reddit? Through all the horror, disgust, and anger, a sharp, almost awkward feeling began to break through. Relief. And final, ironclad confirmation. That tattoo is not a threat. It's not a show of strength. It's a panic attack etched into skin. It's the scream of a narcissist who no longer has anyone to play off, whose usual audience has left, leaving him in the ringing silence of his own ego. He couldn't keep me in his life, couldn't control my departure, so he has imprisoned a caricatured, controlled version of me, obedient, eyes closed, dead, in his shitty, vindictive fantasy. He thought by doing this, he'd become a warrior, a victor, a tamer of his demons. But in reality, he became a slave to his grudge, a slave to an image that will now follow him into every locker room, every beach, every intimate encounter. Imagine. He meets a new woman. Passion, infatuation. The moment of intimacy comes. He takes off his shirt. And she sees it. A hyper-realistic head of another woman on his back. What dialogue follows? Oh, that's my ex. Bitch broke my life, so I immortalized her as a trophy. Cool, huh? Any sane woman would scream, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" and run. Anyone who stays and admires it will be of the same ilk, and their relationship will turn into a toxicity competition I'd happily watch from afar with popcorn. He's condemned himself to see my face every day, looking in the mirror, and he looked in the mirror a lot, with love. Mine, not his own genius reflection, but mine. He paid thousands of dollars and endured hours of pain to ink my portrait onto himself. It's the greatest, most unintentional act of worship imaginable. His skin has become a memorial plaque to my liberation. And me? I'm forgetting him, more every day. With every session with Linda, every walk with Emily, every archival find of history that has nothing to do with him. I am free, truly, and he will forever be that guy with his ex-wife's head on his back. That's his new brand. His kaleidoscope designs failed, but this vile masterpiece, that's forever. So, Kyle, if you're, as usual, trawling Reddit for mentions of yourself, greedily scavenging for crumbs of attention, thank you. Seriously. It's the best divorce anniversary gift I could have gotten. It's the perfect, ironic closure to our story. It forever captures not my weakness, but your madness. Your pathological inability to let go. Your need to turn a living person into an object of your sick narrative. And I pity it. And your new muse, and you, and anyone who gets within arm's reach of you now, with this knowledge. After I sat on the floor for a while, I got up. Made another strong coffee. Called Gwen, my lawyer. She listened, asked me to send the photo, was silent on the other end for a long time. Then she said, Jesus. Well, that's graphic. It's not a direct threat of physical violence, unfortunately for a restraining order, but it's an incredibly valuable psychological portrait. Save everything. Block everything. If he tries to contact you again, straight to me. And, Sarah, congratulations. He just gave himself away completely to the world. You won without even playing the game. Then I called Linda, my therapist. We had an unscheduled Skype session. She helped me unpack this whirlwind of emotions. He's trying to regain control, she said. But that control is illusory, over an image, not reality. Your disgust and anger are absolutely normal. And the feeling of relief. That's your subconscious understanding the finality of this gesture. The door has slammed shut forever, and he welded it shut himself. And then I went on my date. Yes, exactly. I already had plans. With a guy named Leo. We'd met a month ago at a lecture on cartography history. He also works in an archive at a different university. Messy, wears glasses, kind eyes, a quiet voice. Our first date was at the botanical garden. We talked for 2 hours about fern classification systems. He didn't try to impress me with big words or spontaneous acts. He listened, attentively, without interrupting, and asked clarifying questions. When I met him that evening at the movie theater entrance, we'd agreed to see some old spy film. I must have looked a bit distracted. Are you okay, Sarah? He asked, gently touching my elbow. I looked at him, at his honest, open face, his simple plaid shirt, and suddenly realized how happy I was that he was the one here. That I wasn't with someone who might have a tattoo of someone's head on his back. Yes, I said and smiled. A real, unforced smile. Just a long day, but I'm fine now. We watched the movie, ate no butter popcorn. He, like me, disliked the greasiness, and his shoulders sometimes brushed mine. It was warm, simple, without subtext. After the film, we drank tea at an all-night diner and discussed inaccuracies in the movie's depiction of an encryption machine. He knew about my divorce in general terms but never pried for details. And I didn't tell him about the photo. Not today, maybe someday, or maybe not, because it's no longer part of my life. It's an absurd artifact from another dimension. I returned home, turned on the light in my quiet, clean apartment. Maisie stretched on her windowsill perch. I opened my laptop, logged into my archival dust, Instagram. I hadn't posted anything today. I scrolled the feed. Someone posted a photo of an 18th century book binding with cracked gold leaf. Someone else, an old library card with neat handwriting. I liked them. Then I opened my gallery and found a photo I'd taken in the archive a few days ago. A stack of letters on yellowed paper, tied with twine. Simple, but endlessly interesting to me. I posted it, captioned, "Found today. Silence on paper. A good day." And it was the truth. UPD 3 hours after the post. Wow, folks. I stepped away for a couple of hours, came back, and my phone, my main one, with the normal number, nearly exploded from notifications. Thank you for all of it, absolutely all the comments, awards, words of support, and even those who wrote, "Fake." Consider it a compliment that my life seems too surreal to be true. I'll answer the most frequent questions I saw scrolling through. Police, restraining order? As I wrote, I consulted with my lawyer. In our state, to get a restraining order based on a single image without direct verbal threats, "I'll kill you," "wait for me," etc., you'd have to try very hard. A judge would likely consider it symbolic expression of emotions, and freedom of expression, however gross that sounds. Gwen said, "It's a great case for the future if anything else happens, but for now, no." I documented the fact of the message from an unknown number. I have a screenshot, the number is saved, and sent everything to Gwen. She's now officially aware and said if there's even a hint of continuation, we'll go all out. Silence so far. Why didn't you change the number immediately? Stupidity and naivety. The old number was mine for 10 years, tied to 1,000 services, 2 banks, insurance, even my library card. Thought he'd evaporated from my life so completely he wouldn't even remember it. I was wrong. Bought a new SIM today right after the lawyer call. Kept the old one as evidence, but it's now in Gwen's safe. The tattoo artist? What a creep. I know a bit about modern tattoo culture, thanks, Kyle, for shoving that down my throat too. The style is very specific. After some, very careful, Googling, I'm almost certain it's the work of an LA-based artist known as Chiaroscuro. He specializes in black and gray hyperrealism and dark fantasy. His work is recognizable. Write to him? No, absolutely not. That would sink me to Kyle's level, drag me into unnecessary drama. Give him a new narrative about a stalker ex who interferes with my art. Let that artist sleep peacefully. Most likely, Kyle just showed him a photo of me from social media. My profiles were private, but old shared photos might be out there, or described me. The artist just fulfilled an order. Though, ethically, doing a tattoo of a real person's head in this context is a big question mark. Cat Maisie. She's perfectly fine, sleeping on my lap as I write this. She's 12, queen of the windowsill, demands fresh tuna daily. After the move, she gained weight and got even fluffier. Date with Leo went great. We agreed to go to a flea market in a neighboring town this weekend to look for old books. No fantasy, armor, or severed heads. Just dusty folios and possibly bad thermos coffee. Therapy. Yes, I'm still going. Linda is my guardian angel. She helped me today with this new development. Without her, I might have spiraled into panic again. Most importantly, for those writing they've been through similar. My messages are flooded with stories from people who survived emotional abuse, gaslighting, relationships with narcissists. I'm reading every one, and it hurts, and yet, feels warm. Because we survived. We got out. This validation, this, "I understand you, I've been there," is priceless. Thank you. I'll keep you updated if anything happens. But I sincerely hope this cretinous, artistic gesture was his swan song. The final chord in the symphony of absurdity I had the misfortune to listen to for 8 years. Now I really need to sleep. Tomorrow at the archive, a box with some 19th century whalers' diaries awaits me. And that is a billion times more interesting than anything Kyle could ever conjure up. UPD 2 days later. A small but juicy update. The situation is developing with an irony no screenwriter could invent. My friend Emily, who still follows some mutual acquaintances from the world of art and air, sent me a screenshot today. Kyle, obviously unable to bear that only I saw his masterpiece, a drop in the ocean for his ego, posted a photo of his new tattoo on Instagram. Not just in stories but a full post. Yes, he turned it into a story about his healing and art therapy. The hashtag, personal mythology, just killed me. The comments under the post, or something else. About 30% are his few sycophants and the new muse, an account of a girl with blue hair and a piercing gaze. Writing, powerful, deep, what a transformative act. The other 70% are a stream of righteous anger from strangers who probably found the post via hashtags. Are you seriously posting a tattoo of your ex's head? That's sick, dude. Art therapy? Looks like psychosis. I hope she sees this and files for a restraining order. Bro, get therapy. Real therapy. This is the cringiest, most toxic thing I've ever seen. The interesting part is, he's fiercely replying to the criticism. Writing long, pretentious comments about the artist's freedom, the masses' misunderstanding, that true art is always provocative. He's basking in the attention, even negative. For him, it's food. He's at the center of drama, people are talking about him. This is exactly what he wanted. I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't do anything. Gwen advised me to save screenshots of the post and comments, which I did. They further characterize his motives and state. And Emily said, Sarah, he's publicly made a fool and a psycho of himself for everyone to see. You didn't lift a finger. That's brilliant. And you know what? My feeling of relief only grew stronger. He didn't just get a tattoo. He launched it into the world. And the world, at least a significant part of it, gave a perfectly adequate assessment. His personal mythology was publicly exposed as pathological resentment. He thought he'd become a warrior artist, but he became a meme. A rather creepy one, but a meme. Leo, by the way, when I cautiously, and even laughing, told him this story yesterday, without past details, just the fact, my ex got a tattoo with my image in a dubious context and posted it on Insta, looked at me very seriously and said, I'm so sorry you're going through that. That's disgusting. But, you know, it's like finding a letter from a madman from the 18th century in your archive. Interesting from a historical perspective, as a period document, but you definitely shouldn't have lived with that person. He hit the nail perfectly on the head. That's exactly how I view it now, as a historical curiosity, a document of pathology. Thank you all for your support. The feeling that I have a whole community of people behind me saying, yeah, that's fucked up, is incredibly empowering. I'm focused on my present. On the box with the Whaler's diaries, they're incredibly boring, by the way. He only writes about weather and barrels of oil, perfect. On the upcoming trip to the flea market. On the silence in my apartment, which no one disturbs anymore. UPD 3, 2 weeks later. Some time has passed, and I want to put a period at the end of this story. For myself and for you who have been so kind and supportive. First, about Kyle and his art therapy. His Instagram post, after the initial surge of attention, mostly negative, sank into the feed. He made a couple more attempts to keep the discussion alive, posting stories with musings on the weight of trophies and the burden of memory, but the response was lukewarm. His new muse, the performance artist, seems to have cooled off too. At least, her account hasn't featured him or any mentions for a couple of weeks. In their joint photos, she always looked at the camera defiantly, while he had that same gaze over heads I remembered so well. I think even for her, the performance became too much. When your new boyfriend doesn't just talk about his toxic ex, but wears her head on his back, that's even too much for a performance piece. As for me, I've completely changed all my contacts. The old number is dead. Social media has been thoroughly scrubbed, set to maximum privacy, all suspicious followers removed. I feel digitally secure. Therapy with Linda is progressing. We worked a lot on this tattoo incident. She helped me finally move it from the category of threatening event to pitiful and revealing act. We even laughed a little at his hashtags. Laughter, it turns out, is the best weapon against such pompous darkness. Leo is lovely. We went to that flea market. He found a battered 1940s copy of Moby Dick for me, and I found a vintage star chart for him. We drank that terrible thermos coffee and talked about everything. No drama, no games. Just a calm, gradual getting to know each other. He knows I had a difficult past but doesn't pry for details. And I value that space. It allows me to be today's Sarah, not Kyle's eternal victim. Work at the archive has become my sanctuary and source of joy. The Whaler's diaries turned into a sensation. At the end of one notebook, we found not weather notes but elegant poems, clearly dedicated to the wife waiting for him ashore. That contrast, rough work and tender poetry, touched me deeply. I'm helping prepare a small exhibition. My life is filled with meaning I choose myself. This morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. Maisie was purring at my feet. And my first thought wasn't to check my phone or prepare excuses for Kyle's potential bad mood. My first thought was, it's Thursday, the cafeteria will have waffles with maple syrup. And that was amazing. Amazing in its simple, mundane normality. I realized the tattoo story became the final, decisive act of our divorce. The court papers were the legal ending. But this photo, his desperate, sick cry frozen in ink under his skin, became the emotional period. He put his entire essence on display. And that essence turned out to be so petty, pathetic, and toxic that even the last lingering doubts, did I not give enough? Was I too cold, evaporated without a trace? He wanted to hurt me, to scare me, to pull me back into his orbit even as a demon, a ghost, a trophy. But instead, he gave me the most valuable gift, absolute certainty in the rightness of my choice. I didn't just leave a bad marriage. I escaped a psychological prison, whose guard dog is now forever tattooed on the former warden's back. So, Reddit, thank you. Your comments, stories, advice, and even anger on my behalf have been part of my healing. I no longer feel alone in this story. I know there are many like me. And if you're reading this, stuck in your own relationship with a narcissist, a sociopath, an emotional vampire, know this. There is a way out. It's scary, it's painful, it will demand strength you don't seem to have. But on the other side, there is silence. There are waffles on Thursdays. There are people who listen without interrupting. There is a life that belongs only to you. My life now is archival dust on my fingers, a cat's purr, laughter with friends, calm dates, and the knowledge that no one has the right to dictate who I should be. That I am no longer an anchor or a navigation system for someone else's ship. I am a whole, independent continent. And it's only the beginning for me. With this post, I'm closing this chapter. Forever. From now on, there will only be updates about archival finds, photos of Maisie, and maybe how my next date with Leo goes. But about Kyle, that's it. He's become a character from a badly written old play I've finally been able to send to the recycling bin. Be well, find peace, and have healthy personal boundaries. You deserve it. P.S. And yes, if your partner ever hints that you are their anchor, run. Run without looking back, because anchors don't fly. They lie at the bottom, get covered in barnacles and rust. And you deserve to fly. Or to sail, but wherever you want to go. Author's epilogue from Sarah, 6 months later. I hadn't planned to write more, but life offered one final, perfectly ironic twist that simply must be shared. This morning, a colleague from the digitization department, a guy in his mid-20s and a big fan of contemporary art and tattoo culture, stopped by my desk. Over a cup of coffee, he said laughing, "Sarah, you won't believe the meme I saw on TikTok yesterday. Some dude with a fantasy-styled tattoo of his ex's head is whining about not being able to get a job at a normal studio because all the HR people, especially women, are horrified by his art. And he's blaming cancel culture and prudishness." My heart skipped a beat. "Can you see his face?" I asked as calmly as possible. "Well, the tattoo. Yes, close up. The guy himself is only shown from behind or wearing a mask. But the story is wild. Says it's art therapy and he's misunderstood. The comments are pure fire. They tore him apart." I silently went on TikTok, an account I'd recently created to follow library trends. Dug around a bit using hashtags. And found it. It was him. A new account, a pompous bio, artist, mythmaker, transcending the boundaries of perception, and a series of short, whiny videos where he, without showing his face, only his neck and shoulders with that same tattoo in the background, rants about being persecuted for his most honest art, about not being able to get a job at creative agencies. They're afraid of real talent. About being dumped by another girlfriend, who couldn't handle the burden of his past. It was both pitiful and funny. His personal mythology had literally become his brand. Literally. The tattoo he got to take control of the story was now controlling him. It was cutting him off from the normal world, from a career, from relationships. He had become a prisoner of his own toxic gesture. And you know what I felt? Deep, all-encompassing calm. And even a drop of gratitude? Not to him, to life, for its impeccable sense of justice and irony. He wanted to make me his trophy, his eternal reminder, but ended up making a trophy of himself. He became a walking cautionary sign. This is what happens when narcissism meets bad taste and a lack of therapy. I showed the video to Leo that evening. He watched it, shook his head, and said, "Poor guy. He dug his own hole, poured concrete into it, lay down inside, and now complains it's dark and cramped." I laughed. It was the perfect description. Then Leo asked if I wanted to go on a picnic with him and his sister, who's visiting town, this weekend. I said, yes, because my life now is picnics with nice people, archival finds, evenings with a book and a cat on my lap. It's choosing what to wear in the morning without thinking if someone will approve. It's the freedom to be silent when I want to be silent and to speak when I have something to say. Not so long ago, I was an anchor at the bottom of someone else's sea. Now I am the ship. And my sea is calm, deep, and full of its own, unexpected wonders. To all of you still on your way to your own shore, patience and strength. It's worth it. The end.